And getting back to the lyrics quickly, Ali, do you, for instance, know? You say Ed wrote most of the lyrics, so do you know what he's talking about, or do you know what?
Yeah. I mean, in general, Ed's lyric writing is kind of ambiguous and vague, and we kind of wanted to delve more into that for the record.
And there's a difference to your stuff as well.
Yeah, exactly. Some of my songs are a bit more obvious.
Not necessarily obvious, just
not
like more
obvious.
Immediately felt.
Yeah, there's an immediate meaning you can kind of pick out of them sometimes, whereas our stuff, it's when people hear the record, they'll understand that it's, I don't know, some of it might not even sound like English, I don't know.
I like having stuff that's kind of, you can really delve deep into it and stuff. And I think that kind of just adds another layer of depth to the record.
Are the lyrics very personal to you? Are they autobiographical?
Some. I think it's one thing that I think is important to have with lyric writing is empathy. I mean, just, you know, I don't have the most exciting or hard life, so sometimes you do have to kind of separate from yourself to be able to write about certain themes or things. But yeah, some of them. I mean, there's some meanings that are slightly more kind of felt or obvious than others. But yeah, I think in general the lyrics are much more kind of cryptic and mysterious than for example, Ali's solo stuff.
And Ali, I read that you, when you were younger, you liked film scores and that kind of.
Yeah. I mean, film scores was something which I wasn't like super into it. I didn't just, like, listen to film scores constantly, but it was something while I was learning to produce music, I would kind of rip adverts off YouTube and rescore it with orchestral instruments and things like that. Really wanting to build up like a portfolio so I could hopefully go and score films and trailers and things like that. And I had a few small jobs doing that, and then someone asked me to score their film, and I decided to do it more like guitar-based and songwriter-based, and that's where my song From Gold came from, and I kind of just kept playing off that, and then the film scoring ideas kind of just faded into the background.
Well, because I wondered, and this can be for your own project, but also this collaborative album, but is that kind of in the back of your mind that you're trying to create a certain atmosphere or a certain...
Yeah, in a sense, like my last EP, I kind of delved more into using strings and things like that. On our record, there's a lot of brass, and the music I'm making at the moment, there's way more strings, there's going to be brass, it's going to be kind of woodwind, and I really want to try and make a cinematic vibe throughout it. And I think there's a lot of emotion in kind of orchestral music,
right.
And I really want to tie that into my music.
It's great to be able to have that opportunity to work with other musicians. I feel like that's something that we didn't necessarily have that often while working with this record, only towards the very end. But I mean, there's another collaborative project I'm working on with someone else at the moment, and recently at Ali's we got the string player in our live band and his wife, who plays a ton of different instruments, and we just got, you know, like saxophone,
baritone sax, bass clarinet,
you know, all sorts of different instruments, and it's just so exciting and fun to work with all those different things.
In that sense, does it have a visual character, the music?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like there's certain adjectives you can use to describe it all, I guess. But yeah, I would say that a lot of people say that our music is quite cinematic and your music is quite cinematic, and lends itself well to, you know, film and TV or whatever use, which isn't a bad thing. But yeah.
But it's not necessarily that is what you're going for.
No, I wouldn't think so.
Yeah, I don't think you necessarily think about it on that level. You just want to make music.
Like I have done before, like for example with From Gold, making it specifically for picture, because the song was just one whole crescendo.
It can become a bit cynical if you think too much, you know, from the outset about that sort of thing. So I think we just focus on, you know, writing the good songs and then making them sound good afterwards. And if they happen to sound that way, then
like you said, it was way more melody driven. It was all about kind of, we just sat there with kind of 2 acoustic guitars for the main part and just demoed like bass ideas for every song, with kind of getting the strongest melodies we could and things we really liked. Yeah.
And like you mentioned earlier, there wasn't any pressure to release anything. So when was the turning point that it did become an album and you thought, okay, we are going to release this, and
we were approaching people like a year ago.
Yeah, I think like it's been kind of nearly done for a while, but I think when we first properly decided to do an album, maybe like the start of 2015 or something.
Yeah.
So that was kind of half a year after Faux came out, and I think after seeing how well that did and knowing that we had a lot of stuff that we really liked written, that was when we really started to think, okay, no, we could really make something, you know, properly. But as far as like approaching labels and stuff, I think that we, especially with Ali's last studio, just wanted to make, you know, everything as good as possible. I think we were kind of careful to sometimes to wait until things were sounding better.
Because I just don't like showing people demos because they just won't understand what you're going for.
It's important to have that scope, and even you know, you don't want to show people unless it either is fully finished or they can hear how it's intended to sound. And like even that happens with us. Like that happened with Terraform, where I could really hear it and you couldn't. And then once we started recording it, it was, you know, and there was similar ideas vice versa that way on the record.
And both of you obviously have audiences already. So what can they expect from a collaborative thing?
Well, it's quite different to the stuff you've been doing the last few years. You've been doing more dark electronic. So it's closer to kind of my music, mainly because I've been the main producer. But like I said, it's a bit more rock focused, a bit more heavy, and it's a bit more like thought about. And we had other people come in to play parts.
There's this. I mean, there's a song called Vantablack on the record, which is much darker and more electronic than anything that you've done before.
Yeah.
There's
loads more of your voice, for example.
Yeah. There's a lot more kind of. There's one track that's really like lo-fi kind of sound, and yeah, I think my influence in general is usually a bit more on the darker side.
Yeah, so it's slightly darker, I think.
But yeah, I just think it's kind of more kind of. Just deeper, and I mean, I always like making records because I just love the scope that it gives you. You know, you can really properly explore a sound. And I think that's something we've definitely done on this record. Is, you know, it's quite a range of stuff.
Yeah.
And I believe you already released a full record yourself, and Ali, you haven't yet.
No.
So what are you taking away from this whole process towards?
Bridgie can do it.
Well, yeah. I mean, I was kind of. In the early stages of making my record when we decided to make this one, because I was kind of fighting the corner of let's just do an EP, let's just do a few singles, see how it goes. And Ed was like, nah, we're doing a record. And I was like, okay, let's just, right, we'll just do it. And I'm kind of glad because it means I've got to make a record before I get to make my debut. And it means that now I'm in a way better space, like literally and metaphorically to make the best kind of record I can make. And a lot of things I was making for the conception of my record I don't like anymore, so I'm kind of happy I haven't gone ahead with it.
Right. So am I. I mean, in terms of, you know, other projects that I'm working on, I've learned a hell of a lot making this record on the production side and in general, and I think we're just both better musicians for it.
Yeah.
Finally then, the album is called Heiress. When in the whole process did that title?
Very end, I think it was more kind of a sonic thing than anything else, because I think at the end the record just ended up sounding quite kind of regal and
quite grand.
But there's not necessarily
like a huge attachment to the name through the record. I mean, there's quite dark songs about death and change, and I feel like Heiress kind of ties into that in a sense. You know, being an heiress, changing over death, and bringing something out through death. And like Ed said, there's death.
The darker side of
it. Yeah, I think it's just kind of like a regal kind of grand name that just kind of seemed to fit. It's always really tough naming albums, and yeah, that was just, I guess, what we ended up gravitating towards. But it was. I mean, we were going to call it Vantablack, but that was which is one of the songs on the record, but that ended up just not fitting, because before the 9 songs that we did have, which 2 of which we now don't have, and now we have 11, so there's 4 different ones. Some of them were a bit more rocky and darker, and now it's a bit on the lighter side, so we just didn't think that fitted.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much for your time.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's all right.
Cheers.